Hi, y'all. You know what time it is. Woo! Get into it! I'm sorry, y'all. I'm a bit tired. I've had a bit of a day. But I'm glad to still be here with you. Just tired. Very tired. It's been a bit of a day. That's all I say. But I hope you all have had a great day on my favorite day of the week. Oh my goodness. Okay, see, this is why I'm tired, because I don't even have my mic fully set up. Hold on one second. Yes, I'm wearing my comfy robe. I like my robe. It's awesome. Everybody should have a cool robe that they have on hand that just is comfy and fluffy and whatnot. Oh, it's been a long day. But like I said, I'm glad to be here with y'all, because it could be totally different. And of course, I don't own the music that you are listening to in the background. Oh. Alright. Ah! Okay. Get comfortable. Yes, y'all, I needed the big cup today. It was necessary. There is no judgment in this house. Now, you all didn't come here to hear me blather. You came to listen to a great story. And as I say, I don't own the music that you're listening to in the background. And like I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, leisurely time, in between time, nap time, sleepy time, school time, worky time. So I hope you enjoy. We're back with the Book of 3. We're on chapter 17 this time, and we only will have 3 chapters left after this. And there are 4 other books in this series, and they typically fly by pretty fast. So we're going to read all 5 books of the Prydain Chronicles, and we're definitely going to read all of the Series of Unfortunate Events books on Instagram, and I will be posting the more recent chapters of the Book of 3 on YouTube later tonight. So please be patient and bear with me. All right. There we go. Chapter 17. The Fledgling. The Gwithate hung like a crumpled black rag, one wing upraised, the other folded awkwardly on its chest. No larger than a raven, it was young and barely out of its first molt. The head seemed a little too big for its body, the feathers thin and quilly, as Taran cautiously approached. The Gwithate fluttered vainly, unable to free itself. The bird opened its curved beak and hissed warningly, but its eyes were dull and half-closed. The companions had followed Taran. As soon as Gurgi saw what it was, he hunched up his shoulders and with many fearful glances behind him turned and crept off to a safe distance. Melangar whinnied nervously. The white pig, undisturbed, sat on her haunches and looked cheerful. Fluter, on seeing the bird, gave a low whistle. "It's a stroke of luck the parents aren't about," he said. "Those creatures will tear a man to shreds if their young are in danger."
"It reminds me of Okren,"
Alanwe said.
"especially around the eyes, on days when she was in a bad temper."
Dolly pulled his axe from his belt. "What are you going to do?" Taran asked. The dwarf looked at him with surprise.
"Going to do? Do you have any other stupid questions? You can't imagine I'd let it sit there, can you? I'm going to chop off its head to begin with."
"No!" cried Taran, seizing the dwarf's arm. "It's badly hurt."
"Be glad of that," snapped Dolly. "If it weren't, neither you nor I or any of us would be standing here."
"I will not have it killed," Taran declared. "It's in pain and it needs help."
"That's true. It doesn't look comfortable at all. For the matter of that, it looks even worse than Okren."
The dwarf threw his axe to the ground and put his hands on his hips.
"I can't make myself invisible," he snorted, "but at least I'm no fool. Go ahead, pick up the vicious little thing. Give it a drink. Pat its head, then you'll see what happens. As soon as it's got strength enough, the first thing it'll do is slice you to bits. And next thing, fly straight to Arorn. Then we'll be in a fine stew."
When what Dolly says, it's true, Fluter added. I myself don't enjoy chopping things up. The bird is interesting in a disagreeable sort of way, but we've been lucky so far with no trouble from Gwithates at least. I don't see the use of bringing one of Aroran's spies right into our bosom, as you might say. A flam is always kind-hearted, but it seems to me this is, overdoing it. Medwin would not say so, Tard answered. In the hills he spoke of kindness for all creatures, and he told me much about the Gwithates. I think it's important to bring this one to Cardathel. No one has ever captured a live Gwithate as far as I know. Who can tell what value it may have? The bard scratched his head. Well, yes, if it had any use at all, it would be better alive than dead, but the proposition is risky no matter what. Tarn gestured for the others to stand away from the bush. He saw the Gwithate was wounded by more than thorns. Perhaps an eagle had challenged it, for blood flecked its back and a number of feathers had been torn out. He reached in carefully. The Gwithate hissed again, and a long, rasping rattle sounded in its throat. Tarn feared the bird might be dying even then. He put a hand under its feverish body. The Gwithate struck with beak and talons, but its strength had gone. Tarn lifted it free of the thorn bush. If I can find the right herbs, I'll make a poultice, Tard told Eilonwe, but I'll need hot water to steep them. While the girl prepared a nest of grass and leaves, Tard asked Gurgi to build a fire and heat some stones, which could be dropped into a cup of water. Then, with Henwin at his heels, he quickly set out to search for the plaids.
How long are we gonna stay here? Dolly shouted after him. Not that I care. You're the ones in a hurry, not I. Humph!
He thrust his axe into his belt, jabbed his cap tight on his head, and furiously held his breath. That's what I imagine he looks like, because he's trying to make himself invisible. Which, fun fact, kids, a poultice is to describe when you use local herbs and plants to basically mask over a wound. Like, say you got cut, or if you've been poisoned, you can find local herbs to place upon the wound and be able to work effectively to wrap around it, and basically it's like an herbal wrapping. There you go. That's the best way to describe it. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Tarn was again grateful for what Cole had taught him of herbs. He found most of what he needed growing nearby. Henwin joined the hunt with enthusiasm, grunting happily, rooting under leaves and stones. Indeed, the white pig was the first to discover an important variety Tarn had overlooked. The Gwithate did not struggle when Tarn applied the poultice. Soaking a piece of cloth torn from his jacket in another healing brew, he squeezed the liquid drop by drop into the bird's beak.
That's all very well, said Dolly, whose curiosity had got the better of him, and who had come to observe the operation. How do you imagine you'll carry the nasty thing perched on your shoulder?
I don't know, Tarn said. I thought I could wrap it in my cloak. Dolly snorted.
That's the trouble with you great clodhoppers. You don't see beyond your noses, but if you expect me to build a cage for you, you're mistaken.
A cage would be just the thing, Tarn agreed. No, I wouldn't bother you with that. I'll try to make one myself.
Oh, stop it!
The dwarf watched contemptuously while Tarn gathered saplings and attempted to weave them together.
I can't stand looking at botched work. Here, get out of the way!
He shouldered Tarn aside, squatted on the ground, and picked up the saplings. He trimmed them expertly with his knife, lashed them with braided vines, and in no time at all, the dwarf held up a serviceable cage.
That's certainly more practical than making yourself invisible,
Eilonwe said. The dwarf made no answer and only looked at her angrily. Tarn lined the bottom of the cage with leaves, gently put the Gwithate inside, and they resumed their march. Dolly now led them at a faster pace to make up for the time they had lost. He tramped steadily down the hill slopes without even turning to see whether Tarn and the others were able to keep up with him. The speed of their pace, Tarn realized, served little purpose, since they were obliged to halt more frequently, but he did not deem it wise to mention this to the dwarf. Throughout the day, the Gwithate steadily improved. At each halt, Tarn fed the bird and applied the medicines. Gurgi was still too terrified to come near. Tarn alone dare handle the creature. When Fluter, endeavoring to make friends, put his finger into the cage, the Gwithate roused and slashed at him with his beak.
I warned you, snapped Dolly. No good'll come of this, but don't pay any attention to what I say. Go right ahead, cut your own throats, then come around running and complaining afterward. I'm just a guide. I do what I'm ordered to do, and that's all.
Dolly and King Idleleg are just unhappy Gus's, just negative Nancy's, just party poopers. Everybody has a party. Well, I think the song goes, everybody needs a party pooper, that's why they invited you. Party pooper, party pooper. And that's what Dolly's be. He's just being a party pooper. Silliness. At night they made camp and discussed plans for the morrow. The Gwithate had entirely recovered and had also developed an enormous appetite. It squawked furiously when Tard did not bring its food quickly enough and rattled its beak against the cage. It gobbled up the morsels Tard gave it, then looked around for more. After eating, the Gwithate crouched at the bottom of the cage, its head cocked and listening, its eyes following every movement. As my eyes are also moving. Taran finally ventured to put a finger past the bars and scratched the Gwithate's head. The creature no longer hissed, and it made no attempt to bite him. The Gwithate even allowed Alodwe to feed it, but the bard's attempts to make friends failed.
I knows perfectly well you'd have agreed to chop off its head,
Alodwe told Fluter.
so you can't blame the poor thing for being annoyed at you. If somebody wanted to chop off my head, then came around afterward and wanted to be sociable, I'd peck at him too.
Gwydion told me the birds are trained when young, Taran said. I wish he were here. He would know best how to handle the creature. Perhaps it could be taught differently. But there's bound to be a good falconer at Cairdathel, and we'll see what he could do. But next morning, the cage was empty. Dolly, who had risen along before the others, was the first to discover it. The furious dwarf thrust the cage under Tard's nose. The sapling bars had been slashed to pieces by the Gwithate's beak.
And there you have it, cried Dolly. I told you, don't say I didn't warn you. The treacherous creature's halfway to Anuvan by now. After listening to every word we said, if Aurora didn't know where we were, he'll soon know enough. You've done well, oh, very well, Dolly snorted. Spare me from fools and assistant pig keepers.
Tard could not hide his disappointment or fear. Fluter said nothing, but the bard's face was grim. I've done the wrong thing again as usual, Tard said angrily. Dolly is right. There's no difference between a fool and an assistant pig keeper.
That's probably true,
agreed Ilodwe, whose remark did nothing to cheer Tard.
but, she went on, I can't stand people who say I told you so. That's worse than somebody coming up and eating your dinner before you have a chance to sit down. Even so, she added, Dolly means well. He's not half as disagreeable as he pretends to be, and I'm sure he's worried about us. He's like a porcupine, all prickly on the outside, but very ticklish once you turn him over. If he'd only stop trying to make himself invisible, I think he should do a lot to improve his disposition.
There was no time for further regrets. Dolly set them on an even swifter pace. They soon followed the hills along the Ystrad Valley, but at midday the dwarf turned west and once more began to descend toward the plains. The sky had grown as thick and gray as lead. Violent gusts of wind whipped at their faces. The pale sun gave no warmth. Melangar neighed uneasily. Hedwyn, placid and agreeable until now, began to roll her eyes and mutter to herself. While the companions rested briefly, Dolly went ahead to scout the land. In a short time he was back again. He led them to the crest of a hill, motioned them to stay close to the ground, and pointed toward the Ystrad below. The plain was covered with warriors on foot and on horseback. Black banners snapped in the wind. Even at this distance, Tard could hear the clank of weapons, the steady, heavy drumming of marching feet. At the head of the winding columns rode the Horned King. The giant figure towered above the men-at-arms, who galloped behind him. The curving antlers rose like eager claws. As Tard watched, terrified but unable to turn away, the Horned King's head swung slowly in the direction of the heights. Tard pressed flat against the earth. Auroran's champion, he was sure, could not see him. It was only a trick of his mind, a mirror of his fear, but it seemed the Horned King's eyes sought him out and thrust like daggers at his heart. They have overtaken us, Tard said in a flat voice.
Hurry, snapped the dwarf. Get hustling. Instead of dawdling and moaning, we're no more than a day away from Cardathel, and so are they. We could still move faster. If you hadn't stopped for that ungrateful spy of an Uven, we'd be well ahead of them by now. Don't say I didn't warn you.
We should arm ourselves a little better, the bard said. The Horde King will have outriders on both sides of the valley. Tarn unstrapped the weapons on Melangar's back and handed a bow and a quiver of arrows to his companions, as well as a short spear for each. King Idleg had given them round bronze bucklers. They were dwarf-sized, and after his view of the marching host, Tarn found them pitifully small. Gurgi buckled a short sword around his waist. Of all the band, he was the most excited.
Yes, yes, he cried. Now bold, valiant Gurgi is a mighty warrior, too. He has a grinding gasher and a pointed piercer. He is ready for great fightings and smitings.
And so am I, Fluter declared. Nothing withstands the onslaught of an angry flam.
The dwarf clapped his hands to his head and gnashed his teeth.
Stop jabbering and move,
he sputtered. This time he was too furious to hold his breath. Tarn slung the buckler over his shoulder. Hedwyn hung back and grunted fearfully. I know you're afraid, Tarn whispered coaxingly, but you'll be safe in Cardathel. So, kids, a buckler is a type of shield. So it typically is something that fits right over your arm. Actually, okay, so Captain America's shield from the MCU, from the Marvel movies, that is an example of a buckler because it stays in place. It just buckles right into your forearm and it just stays there. Whereas his, he can throw it out and it boomerangs and ricochets back to where it belongs because it's magnetized. But a buckler, it sits right here, boom, and it stays right there. It's not a super big shield, but it's enough to cover your forearm to just quickly just bow, just block it in enough time to like bow and slash again, bow and slash again, bow and slash again. So it's a pretty effective tool, nonetheless. The pig followed reluctantly, but as Dolly set off once again, she lagged behind, and it was all Tarn could do to urge her forward. Her pink snout trembled, her eyes darted from one side of the path to the other. At the next halt, Dolly summoned Tarn.
Keep on like this, and you'll have no chance at all. First a Gwyneth delays us, and now a pig.
She's frightened, Tarn tried to explain to the angry dwarf. She knows the Horde King is near.
Then tie her up, Dolly said. Put her on the horse.
Tarn nodded. Yes, she would like it, but there's nothing else we can do. A few moments later, the pig had been crouched at the roots of a tree. Now there was no sign of her. Hen? Tarn cried. He turned to the bard. Where did she go? He asked in alarm. The bard shook his head. Neither he nor Alanwe had seen her move. Gurgi had been watering Melangar and had not noticed the pig at all. She can't have run off again, Tarn cried. He raced back into the woods. When he returned, his face was pale. She's gone, he gasped. She's hiding somewhere. I know it. He sank to the ground and put his head in his hands. I shouldn't have let her out of my sight, not even for a moment, he said bitterly. I have failed twice.
Let the others go on, Ilanwe said. We'll find her and catch up with them.
Before Tarn could answer, he heard a sound that chilled his blood. From the hills came the voices of a hunting pack in full cry and the long notes of a horn. The champion stood frozen with dread, with the ice of terror in his throat. Tarn looked at the silent faces around him. The dire music trembled in the air. A shadow flickered across the lowering sky. Where Gwyn the hunter rides, murmured Fluter, death rides close by. And that is where we will end for today. And that's the Horde King on his horse, evil as ever. But we are about to meet a new character that kind of was introduced to us in chapter 3 of this book. We're going to get some more background the next time we meet. Again, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for your patience with me. I love you all so very much. And I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye, y'all.